Okay, so now we're going to go to what I've called already tonight the most important race in this state. The most important race is the Supreme Court Justice, and we have Trey Allen here with us tonight.
All the way with Trey.
All the way with Trey, and he is running for the Supreme Court seat, and I'm going to give him the rest of that. Trey's going to speak to you for a few minutes. He's not on the 2-minute clock. He gets to speak to you for a few minutes, and then he's going to take some questions. So here's Trey.
Thank you, Dale. I am Trey Allen, and I am running to retire one of the liberal activist justices on the North Carolina Supreme Court. It's a real honor to be with you here tonight and to help celebrate the wonderful work that CAAG has done. So thank you for letting me take part in that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, and then I'm going to tell you the most important thing that you need to know about any judicial candidate, and that's what the candidate stands for. So I grew up in Lumberton, North Carolina. I met my wife in high school when the county and the city school systems merged. We've got 5 children. That's why I'm prematurely gray. And that's why, although I'm 47, I feel 87. We homeschool them, or my wife homeschools them, and they're ages 6 to 17. So it's a big job. And we do that because we want them to share our faith in God, our Christian faith, and our love for this great country. I went to UNC Pembroke for undergrad. I went to Chapel Hill for law school. And then after law school, I spent 4.5 years in an organization you might have heard of, the United States Marine Corps. I spent most of that time overseas. I did a deployment in Iraq, so I'm a proud veteran of the Iraq War. When I came back to North Carolina, I had the real privilege and good fortune to clerk for a man many of you have heard of, Paul Newby. That was when he was the newest member of the North Carolina Supreme Court. And clerking with him was a great education in what a conservative justice should be. So I clerked for him. I then went to a firm in Raleigh and practiced law for about 6 years. And it was a great preparation for actually what I'm running to do now, because I had a statewide practice. I was in Superior Court throughout North Carolina. I was handling constitutional law cases and other cases at the trial level and at the appellate level. I argued in front of the North Carolina Supreme Court. I had cases in federal court and at the 4th Circuit. And then I made partner, and my wife says I'm morally opposed to making serious money. So I left right after I made partner. I left primarily because life at the firm was just incompatible with the family life I wanted to have. Not to get too personal, but it wasn't unusual on a Sunday morning for me to go to work, meet the family at church. Maybe I'd eat lunch with them, but maybe not. Maybe I'd go through a drive-through on the way back to the office and spend the rest of the day at work. And that was just no way to have it. There was no way to have a good family life that way. So I left. I had an opportunity. Now, please don't turn your mind off when I tell you the next thing. I had an opportunity. I took it to become a professor at UNC Chapel Hill. So you're looking at sort of the rarest of species, a conservative tenured Chapel Hill professor. But I'll tell you, if you can be a conservative in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, you can be a conservative anywhere. There are a lot of people, there are many candidates who've been conservatives in places where it's no problem. It's easy. It's not easy to be a conservative and to be known to be a conservative in Chapel Hill, but that's what I've done. And then when Paul Newby became our Chief Justice in January of last year, he asked me to be part of the leadership team for the court system. So I now serve him, the court system. I serve you as the general counsel or the top lawyer for our state's judicial branch. Our judicial branch has some 6,500 people in it, judges, clerks of court, magistrates, and other personnel. So I run an office of 11 lawyers, and we give legal guidance to court officials and court employees throughout North Carolina, and it's an honor to do that. Paul Newby also asked me to do something else. He asked me to run for one of the 2 seats on the North Carolina Supreme Court that will be on the ballot this year. So the Supreme Court right now is 4 liberal activist justices, 3 constitutional conservatives. Thanks to the work of people like you, we went from a 6-1 court in the last election to a 4-3 court. Now, I don't teach math in the Allen family homeschool, and by the way, there's never been a vaccine mandate or a mask mandate at the Allen family homeschool. There's never been CRT at the Allen family homeschool either. I don't teach math at our homeschool, but even I can do that math. 4-3 means, although we've got the Chief Justice spot, he loses every time on the big issues that we really care about. Why? Because it's the rule of 4. 2 of those 4 liberal-held seats are on the ballot, so we can go from a 4-3 court to a 2-5 court, and that would be for at least 6 years. So that's an opportunity to change our state's highest court for a long time to come, and I'm running to do that. So that's a little bit about my background. Now, what about my principles? A couple weeks ago, I was reading Federalist 51. You remember the Federalist Papers? Those papers that were written by Alexander Hamilton and James Madison and John Jay when the Constitution was being ratified. Those papers that we go to understand what our founders understood the Constitution to mean. Well, there was a line in Federalist 51, and that's the great Federalist paper that explains our system of checks and balances and what it's for. There's a line in there that really stood out to me, especially in our current environment. And that line was this: in Republican government, the legislative power necessarily predominates. What does that mean? That means our founders gave us a system in which they expected the big decisions to be made not by the courts, but by representative bodies, by legislatures. I think if our founders came back today, they would be stunned that we just expect the big issues ultimately to wind up in court and to be decided there. That is not the system that they gave us. So how did we get here? We got here because judges forgot, ignored, or overstepped their proper role. Judicial philosophy matters. I want to tell you a little story. In 1992, the United States Supreme Court ruled that even generic non-sectarian prayer at a public high school graduation violates the First Amendment. You know, the First Amendment prohibits the establishment of a state religion. The vote on the U.S. Supreme Court was 5-4. The author of a dissent was Justice Scalia. Anybody remember Justice Scalia? He is one of my judicial heroes, and he was the great exponent of a judicial philosophy called originalism, which used to be, commonplace. And what that says is the Constitution means what it meant when it was ratified, and no court and no judge has the power to change that. And so Justice Scalia looked at the history of prayer in America's civic life, beginning with George Washington's first inaugural. And based on that history of prayer in America's civic life, in America's public life, he said our founders did not mean for the First Amendment to bar prayer at events like high school graduations. Anybody remember or want to take a guess at which president nominated Justice Scalia to the U.S. Supreme Court? Ronald Reagan, that's right. Anybody want to guess who wrote the majority opinion banning prayer at public high school graduations? Now, I heard somebody say Ginsburg, and that's a good guess. She wasn't on the court yet, though. So it wasn't Ginsburg. She would have voted that way. It wasn't Sandra Day O'Connor. That's a good guess. Kennedy, Anthony Kennedy, who wrote many, many bad decisions, by the way. Now, here's the $60,000 question. Now, I'm not going to give you $60,000. Who nominated Justice Kennedy to the Supreme Court? Ronald Reagan. Why do I tell that story? Because it illustrates, friends, it's not enough just to elect someone with an R beside his or her name. if we don't select justices with the right judicial philosophy, they will get it wrong in the cases that we care about the most. So I'm an originalist like Justice Scalia, like Justice Clarence Thomas, and by the way, like Chief Justice Paul Newby. I believe that the right to bear arms is vital, to keep and bear arms, is vital to the defense of freedom. I believe that parents have a fundamental right to the care and control of their children. And I believe that our constitutional rights don't disappear during a declaration of emergency.
Thank you.
And if I am elected to the North Carolina Supreme Court, those principles are going to guide me in all the cases that come before me. Again, my name is Trey Allen. I am your conservative candidate for the North Carolina Supreme Court. I am in a primary. I need your help. Remember, don't go astray. Vote for Trey.
All the way to Trey.
I'm going to trade mine with you, Trey. I'm going to give you this one. Does anybody have questions for Trey?
All the way with Trey.
Let me get back to the back here. Let's ask him a few questions. And I just want to say that somebody in the room had an unfair advantage that was answering those questions. Benton is like a history nut about all of that stuff. We love to talk to Benton about all those cases, but he can recite anything. Go ask Benton questions after this is over. He can recite any of that case law. This is Harold Delancey, one of our longtime members, and he's going to. How you doing, Jay?
I have a problem with mandates. First of all, the legislature writes and passes laws. As a retired police officer, how can I enforce a mandate when it's not a law? So I don't know why we went along with that in the beginning, that you have to wear a mask. To me, it was not even unconstitutional, it's unlawful. It's not the legislature, like you said, the founding fathers had a body that said, hey, we're going to make the laws, we pass them, you have to follow them, not judges. And the last time I looked, judges are legislators. So from what you said, you would probably rule against a mandate.
So I have to be careful because I'm a judicial candidate. We're still under a state of emergency, and those issues could come before me, so I can't tell you
Don't worry about it.
this is how I would vote. But I would like to say something in response to what you said. So we have a law in this state called the Emergency Management Act.
Okay.
And that law gives the governor the power to declare a state of emergency. So that is the statute that he is relying on. Now, it's a question whether he has exceeded his authority. And we know, at least in one way, he certainly did. When he put the state under lockdown at the very beginning of COVID, if you remember, we were all pretty much under house arrest. You could only go out to go to the grocery store or to go to a job if it fit in certain categories, and you couldn't go to church. At the very beginning, he said you cannot go to church. He was sued in federal court. A federal judge ruled that that was unconstitutional, and the governor did not appeal that. So there's a final judgment in that case saying that that part of his mandates was unconstitutional. So I mean, that's just a fact. As far as the length of COVID, I think the longer COVID has gone on, it has certainly raised, I think it's fair to say, serious separation of powers issues. Some people say, look, why do we need to rely on an emergency declaration when the General Assembly has been back in Raleigh? The governor, if he thinks there's a measure that needs to be taken, he can go to our lawmakers and get them to implement it. And he didn't do that for reasons we all know. Our Republican legislature wouldn't have implemented the measures that he wants. So one last thing, again, I can't say how I would rule. I'm a strong believer in personal liberty. Personal liberty. That is a value that I will carry to the bench.
And I'll make a couple comments about that. Any of the judges that are up here, if you ask them questions and they answer that question directly that they may have to rule on, then when it comes time for them to rule on it, they're going to have to recuse themselves or somebody's gonna complain about it, and then we won't have them ruling on it. So if they say they can't answer a question, appreciate the fact that they can't answer it and that they will be ruling on it when the time comes. David Spain, another one of our members here and with the men's group, has a question.
I heard that you said you're an originalist, and I appreciate that because I think that's the way the Constitution ought to be looked at. Recently, we had the Supreme Court make a judgment, and to me, that was precedent because it's not constitutional. I want to know how precedent works in your mind thought, and will this precedent that the Supreme Court just handed down about these maps affect future third parties drawing state maps?
Thank
Good
you.
question.
That's a great question. I'll answer as much of it as I can. There's a principle in the law. It's Latin. It's called stare decisis. And what that literally means is to stand by the matters decided. Now, that's an important doctrine. That means generally when there's precedent on point, you follow that precedent. Now, here's why that's been a good thing in the past. I'll tell you why it's been a good thing, and then I'll tell you how it's been abused over the last few decades. It's been a good thing in the past because it's an acknowledgement by judges that judges don't know everything, that judges don't have a monopoly on wisdom. And so if you're a judge and you have a case on involving the same issue and you follow precedent, that's a way of saying, you know, look, the folks who came before me maybe understood this better than I do. Maybe they knew, they had thought about it in a way that I haven't, and so I'm going to defer to that understanding. It also allows there to be consistency in the law. You don't have to worry that two different people on the same set of facts will end up with two different kinds of decisions or two different outcomes. So it's important for that reason. But whereas in the past it's been really a device of, I would say, judicial modesty, right? We're going to stick with precedent because we accept that we don't necessarily know everything now. It's been abused, I think, by liberal activist judges. They get a case in front of them, they create new precedent, and then they say, oh, you got to stick by it because you're a conservative, and so you have to stand by precedent. Well, that's kind of a long-winded answer, and I'm sorry about that, but it's a big topic. There are criteria in the law that you're supposed to apply when you're evaluating whether to let a prior decision stand. And the North Carolina Supreme Court, although it does usually follow its own precedent, it's not bound by them. Every other court in this every state court has to follow the decisions of the North Carolina Supreme Court. But the North Carolina Supreme Court can overturn its own precedents. So if the decision in the MAPS case, if that precedent is at issue again, the North Carolina Supreme Court will not be absolutely bound by the decision it's made now, this year. And so you have to look at the criteria for whether to stand by it. Obviously, people are raising a lot of concerns about the MAPS decisions. I mean, they're looking at our state constitution, they're saying, wait a minute, the state constitution says the General Assembly shall draw the maps, that power is not committed to the courts. I think that's without saying what I would do, I'd have to say that's a very valid concern. It's a separation of powers issue. One more thing on that, if you think about it, in no other case, when the Supreme Court overturns a state law, does it say, because the law is unconstitutional, does it say, well, this law is unconstitutional, we're going to rewrite it, here's your new law. They don't do that. It goes back to the legislature. Well, maps are legislation. This is the only area that I know of where the courts have said, well, your law is unconstitutional, we're going to rewrite it. So that does raise serious separation of powers issues.
So here's Benton take on.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you, everybody in this room. This is a great meeting. It's a great turnout. Oftentimes, when you go to meetings in different places around the county, you see the same faces time and time again. I look around tonight and I see different faces, and that's exciting. And that's a testament to what Dale and your leadership team has done at this organization. You've rallied and engaged a group behind a conservative cause and a movement, and really doing great things. So I appreciate that. So thank you very much. Today has been a great day for my campaign. Dale started off this meeting by talking about the fundraiser that's coming up in July with Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, excuse me, I almost said Dan Forrest. And this morning, I've been sitting on this for a while. I've been itching. I've always been like a kid on Christmas waiting to endorse it. But our Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson, has officially endorsed me in the campaign for North Carolina State Senate. He's evaluated the race. He's evaluated his campaign. He's determined that he wants me to be up there in Raleigh, supporting him and his agenda and fighting back against the progressive out-of-state interests that are trying to influence politics in North Carolina. I can't be more excited to have Mark Robinson's support, the support of our next governor, the support of the president of the North Carolina Senate, and the support of the conservative champion in this state. It's a big deal. I'm excited. I'm excited to have his support and backing in this race. That's just the beginning. You're going to learn a lot about me here in the next little bit. We're going to do a great job telling everybody about my candidacy, about my views, about my principles, about my priorities. Michelle, a second ago, made a comment that stuck with me. She actually made it a Facebook comment. She probably thinks nobody reads Facebook comments, but I do. She made a comment on somebody's post that it's important to look at what a candidate does when they're not running, what they've done in the past. Look for action. Look for tangible results. Look for things that you've done. And I've got a proven track record here in this county of supporting our organizations, of supporting our people, and supporting conservative causes around this state. Before I get to that, I want to tell you a little bit about myself, just because, again, this is my first meeting I've been to. Appreciate the invitation. I am a Johnston County native. I don't think I've had somebody farming in this county for 200 years like our Representative Penny has, but we've been in the auto parts business, hydraulic business for a long time. I've cut lots of John Deere hoses. I've spilled a lot of battery acid and hydraulic oil on my pants in my past. We've been around for a long, long time. If you've heard me give a stump speech previously, you've heard my line that I have 4 generations of my family that call Johnston County home, from my 92-year-old grandmother to my 1.5-year-old daughter, Allie. This isn't something that I'm doing lightly. This community is, it's my home. I'm committed, I'm invested, we've been here. Regardless of the outcome of this election, I'm still going to be here. I'm still going to be involved. I'm still going to be working to make this a better place to live. Grew up in Smithfield, live in Clayton now. Actually went to high school with Kevin, who's back there in the back. We graduated class of 2005, Triple S. Went to North Carolina State University. Graduated from there, and then went to the University of South Carolina for law school. So, like Mr. Allen over here, I'm an attorney. There's several of us in the room. Don't hold that against us, please. For better or worse. I've been involved in conservative politics for a long time. My genesis in formal politics began in 2005 when I walked down from my dorm in NC State to Republican headquarters on Hillsborough Street and started working for Bill Beasley, who was then the executive director of the North Carolina Republican Party. And y'all remember Bill. He's been there for a long, long time. He's out of, I guess, official formal party politics now, but he was a fixture for a period of time. From there, I went and took a job at the North Carolina Senate with the current Senate President Pro Tem, Phil Berger, which was probably one of the greatest decisions I've ever made. I had a chance to work with him when he was the minority leader. There were 3 other people in the office. I had a chance to be up close and personal with the budget process, the legislative process, see what it took to actually get things done in the General Assembly. And that was back in the day before everything was online like it is now. So I remember, you're in the minority party, and the legislators will recall this. Sometimes the majority party won't exactly share news and information necessarily with their friends on the other side of the aisle. So other interns and me would go sneak down to the printing room and try and find copies of the budget before they were released, and sneak them up to the conference chambers and sneak them in the back door of the sergeant at arms where they were getting popcorn. Those were the fun memories I had. But it was really, really neat to see kind of where things have come from. And it makes you appreciate the Republican majority in North Carolina that we have today, because back in 2005, if you recall 2006, that's when the lottery was passing. That's when Jim Black was getting arrested for corruption. North Carolina was in a tough spot then in the General Assembly with one-party control. The Democrats ran the entire show, and it was chaos. And here we are today. We're on the cusp of a supermajority. We have a Republican governor. We're in a much, much better spot than we were. So I tell this, to know where you're going, you've got to know where you've been. I know where we've been in politics in North Carolina, and I know where we've been in this community in Johnston County. I know where we can go now. From there, I was Les Merritt's political director. Raise your hand if you actually remember Les Merritt. I'm just curious. It's the diehard politicians that remember Les Merritt. Les Merritt was our state auditor for 4 years. He was elected in 2004, ran again in 2008. Everybody remembers 2008. That was a terrible year for politics in North Carolina. I developed and ran a really novel 100-county early voting strategy back in the day before everything was online. Things were paper ballots. I've traveled through most all the counties in the state, lugging signs back and forth to places, asking for votes in early voting sites and things like that. Went to law school after that. Have come back and have been involved in statewide organizations, helping Republicans get elected. In 16, for those of you that remember, I ran for North Carolina Senate. It was District 11 at the time. District 11 covered part of Johnston County, most of Wilson County, and most of Nash County. And I lost that race. I believe it was 631 votes was what I lost by. It was painful. But I won Johnston County with 70% of the vote. I won the Smithfield area precincts with 84% of the vote. I won Archer Lodge with 74% of the vote. Johnston County supported me then, and I'm hoping Johnston County will support me now. Since then, this is where I'm going, circling back to Michelle's comment earlier about what you've done since then. Since then, I found some ways to stay involved and actually do some good things and see some results. Item number 1 in the left-hand corner is election integrity. I have been on the front lines of election integrity fights in North Carolina since that time. I've litigated cases in federal court, 2 specifically to highlight. One on behalf of the Voter Integrity Project, which was a case in Wake County. This is a fun fact. Wake County, I'm going to use round numbers, had about 500,000 registered voting age individuals in 2015. Let's just pick a year. Their voter rolls had 700,000 people on them. Now, you want to talk about a recipe for disaster and fraud. When you have 200,000 more people on your voter rolls and you have eligible people to vote in your county, you're going to have issues. We litigated that case, came to a successful resolution. Wake County announced to do certain things to comply with the National Voter Registration Act. Mr. Barbour back there in the back today sent out a mailer. Some of y'all probably got in your mailbox in this congressional run. On the front page of his mailer was a headline from the News Missouri of people that were getting arrested for voter fraud in North Carolina. There were legal immigrants. There were, I think, 19 of them that they arrested and charged in the Eastern District of North Carolina for casting a ballot illegally and unlawfully. We wanted to find out how that happened. So on behalf of another group called the Public Interest Legal Foundation, we litigated a case to get public records from the State Board of Elections about how they conducted that investigation, what that investigation unturned, and whether there were other people and other methods that they could have done. We did that. In 2020, we worked on behalf of the McCrory campaign as campaign observers and canvassers around the state. I've served as a poll observer in just about all these precincts in Johnston County. We've been doing this when nobody was looking. Before it was the front page topic. The number 1 industry in Johnston County is agriculture. As Representative Penny knows, Representative Strickland knows, Representative White knows. North Carolina, courtesy of several of these people in this room tonight, passed the Right to Farm Act several years ago that guaranteed and provided protections to farmers in response to nuisance lawsuits that are being filed and putting farmers out of business in North Carolina. It's a novel act. Johnston County, even after the law was passed, was not in compliance with that law. There are certain record requirements, there are certain notice requirements, there are certain things that you have to do on the registry. So on behalf of a group of farmers, we worked with the county commissioners. We actually filed a lawsuit. We negotiated with them. And now, as Craig Olive can tell you, the land record system has that notice system. GIS has that notice system. Mr. Caldwell, who's sitting right there, watched that entire process happen. He lived and breathed it for months with me as I was before the planning board time after time after time after time, fighting for our farmers here in Johnston County. Again, it's what you did when nobody was watching. I've been there and I've done it. Law enforcement in this county. I support our law enforcement. When they needed nonprofit organizations to fundraise and to get equipment they weren't getting through normal state budget processes, I stepped up. I dedicated tens, if not hundreds of hours to helping them organize the Adopt a Cop program here in Johnston County. I've helped them fundraise. I've been in their events. In 2016, I was endorsed by the Southern States Police Benevolent Association. I was endorsed by our sheriff. I look forward to rolling out those future endorsements again by other organizations. Law enforcement knows me. They know they can trust me. They know that I'm going to go to Raleigh and I'm going to fight for them. I'm going to talk about three things because I've talked to you about what I've done. I want to talk to you about what I'm going to do. I don't think there's a candidate. It was Alan Swain that said that at an event. He says, "It's nice to know what you've done, but tell me what you're going to do for me." I'm going to protect your Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. I'm a life member of the NRA. In June of 1988, my father gave me a lifetime hunting and fishing license in North Carolina. One of the greatest gifts I've ever received. I want to make sure that your Second Amendment rights protected. I want to make sure that your right to hunt and fish is protected. I want to keep North Carolina the same place that I grew up with those regards. We're growing a lot, we're growing leaps and bounds, but you know what? There's some things you can't take away from us. Mr. Allen talked about this a second ago, with constitutional rights being suspended during the COVID crisis. Sheriff Baker, just across the border in Wayne County, chose to exercise administrative discretion during the COVID crisis and suspend CCP, concealed carry permits, and pistol purchase permits unilaterally because he justified it with an emergency. Now, ultimately, that was deemed to be unconstitutional, but the fact that he even had that discretion is awful. One thing that I intend to do is to remove the pistol permit purchase system in North Carolina. I intend to support constitutional carry in North Carolina. There's a bill, Senate Bill 687, probably won't be there on the docket when I get there, but I will reintroduce and I will support that legislation when it pops up. North Carolina's running a $2.4 billion surplus in our state coffers right now. And that's outstanding. That's a testament to smart budgeting. That's a testament to tax policy and economic growth policy in place. We're in the process of phasing out our corporate income tax, and the next step is to phase out our personal income tax. Because everybody in this room, the vast majority of you, they bring home a wage, they have a W-2 on it. You're not benefiting directly from that corporate income tax phase out. There's only so much that the state government can do to combat inflation. What we can do is give you a raise by working to get rid of that. We need to be able to compete in Florida, we need to be able to compete in Tennessee and other states that have done this, and make this a competitive state for people to work, people to live, and people to do things. And the last thing that I'm going to comment on before I take questions is the right to life. We're going to have an opening here in a few years, courtesy of Roe v. Wade. We're going to have an opportunity to take some serious steps to protect the unborn and live out our Christian values. You're going to need legislators with courage. You're going to need legislators that are willing to take that step. I'm going to be there. 690,000 unborn children were killed in 2020. That's awful. That needs to end. That's a crisis. I look forward to making North Carolina a pioneer in the right to life movement in the 2022 election. I'm a husband. I go to church right over there. You going to church over there? I got 2 kids. I'm committed to this community. I'm going to be here on May 18th regardless of what happens. But I appreciate your votes. I can be your next senator in Raleigh. Thank you.
Thank you, Benton. I'm going to hand you this mic. I'm gonna step around you here. Does anybody have a question for Benton? Y'all gonna let him off that easy, really? Okay, David, tell us. Fire away. Can we hear you?
We've talked a lot about education.
Yes, sir.
Education is the basis for jobs in our state. But education is also about the minds of our children and how they're going to be American citizens and citizens of North Carolina. We have a building that sits up in Raleigh dedicated to the schools and the education. We put a lottery in that's supposed to be money going to education, but yet our teachers can't afford papers and other things. What are we going to do to look at the budget? Because I'm tired of paying my tax money being thrown out the window and not getting any ROI. What are you as a senator going to do about the Department of Education from top to bottom? And I'm talking about the universities as well. What are you going to do about revamping and looking at education and how it's funded? And what are we going to do about making North Carolina quality education, not just second-rate education that will bring more companies in here and hire North Carolina citizens?
That's a great question. You're talking about the Pink Palace, as it's affectionately referred to by some of our legislators. I'll answer that question with just some background. So I serve on the Johnson Community College Board of Trustees, with Commissioner Lauder, who just walked in there in the back. I've been a big proponent of establishing vocational and technical training programs. We've got in our high school system now. We're doubling down on our associate's degree in engineering with our new investment. We're investing what we can to prepare our students for advanced manufacturing and the advanced economy that we're going to need. I'm a big believer in the value of the two-year degree, apprenticeship programs, and making sure those opportunities are in our school system. You won't find a bigger advocate for the community college system and technical training in schools in North Carolina. With regard to the budgeting aspect of it, the first thing that I intend to do is to take a look at all the DEI and SEL programs that are littering the high school programs, that are littering middle schools, that are littering community college and university systems across the state, and work to phase those and cut those out of those budgets, because those are not part of the core mission of the college. And again, I'm gonna go back to what Michelle said. It's important to look at what you did when nobody was running. NC State proposed funding an LGBT center on campus in 2006. I, in the Student Senate, was courageous enough to stand up and say no. That's money that's ancillary to university purpose. That's money that could be going to instruction, that could be going to core functions. Until we are perfect in all those regards, we should not be diverting money to extracurricular activities and things like that for DEI, SEL, and other types of programs. So I've been there. I have a track record of fighting against that. I believe in zero-based budgeting, zero baseline budgeting rather than incrementalism budgeting, where you're justifying your costs and your expense. I'm a big proponent of making sure that you take a top-down look at the administrative costs. There is fluff in Raleigh, and the way I know it is that the Opportunity Scholarship Program provides $5,600 a year per student, whereas we're funded at $9,300 per pupil in Johnson County Public Schools. By my math, that's about $3,700, give or take, in extra costs that private schools are doing better with than our public schools are. I'm with you on that.
Can I ask one more?
Sure.
I travel a lot in my job. I see a lot of roads. I see this boondoggle up here at 540 that's taken, how many, 30 years because of some environmental situation. And look at all the people that are being displaced. Look at the traffic that Johnston County. Down in Kinston, they've got a bypass that goes to nowhere that was funded. They did a bypass over a mile strip. Salisbury, there's a road that's been worked on there, not Salisbury was one of them, but in Statesville, there's been a bridge and an overpass that's been worked on for 10 years. What are we going to do about Department Transportation funding to the areas that we need it? And Johnston County is one of those hot areas with the growth of Wake County, with the businesses coming in here, and with traffic getting much worse. What are we going to do about looking at DOT to fund the correct projects and cut out, just like this guy went belly up on this bridge? Let's give it to people here in North Carolina. Let's hold their feet to the fire. What are we going to do? What are you going to do to look at those that the Department of Transportation to fund what we need to move our people through with transportation?
That's another great question. We could probably have an hour-long conversation about this, but I'm gonna just tell you that one answer to that is smart governance. One reason the Department of Transportation is cash-strapped and behind on projects right now is because decades and decades ago, before any of us in this room were even involved, they passed a bill called the MAP Act, where they designated highway transportation corridors. And what it did is it took away your bundle of sticks as to what you owned in property. So there was a series of decades of litigation involved, whether that constituted inverse condemnation or some form of eminent domain. Those cases are come to bear, so the Department of Transportation is losing hundreds of millions of dollars because of policy choices that were made in the 1990s that are coming home to roost now. You've got to have smart people in office that understand the consequences of action, because a decision today is going to have a consequence 30 years from now. I understand that. I understand that you can't make short-term decisions for short-term profit. Another issue is the SEI. I think it's the formula that's used for infrastructure programs in North Carolina. That was reformed several years ago. It's a balancing act as to where your transportation dollar goes. And the formula was adjusted for the benefit of rural counties. But here's the problem, is that Johnson County is looped in, interestingly, with a set of divisions within DOT that aren't necessarily linked over here with Wake County. In fact, when you look at our regions are looking to the north and to the east. When you look at the bigger couple division, our division starts in Johnson County and goes all the way to Hyde County. we should be integrated right there. Our biggest transportation need is right here across our borders. You've got to look at that, and you've got to couple it. Now, I'll come up with one other example. So Johnson County is a Tier 1 economic development county. Is that correct, Representative White? We're Tier 3, which is the highest. I'm doing it backwards. Tier 3, we're the highest. Okay. Tier 3 economic development is a very prosperous county, and we're right here because we're in this wealthy band courtesy of the suburbs of Raleigh. You go out that way down Brogdon Road, it should be Tier 1 or 2, as Representative Strickland is pointing out, and I agree with that. But the problem is it's just looked on a county by county basis, which is a problem. So the issue is that when we have funding grants and infrastructure grants, places in eastern Johnson County are being ignored and overlooked because of the prosperity that's here. You've got to regionalize and really bear down and look and consider that Clayton isn't the same as Princeton. Brogdon isn't the same as Archer Lodge. You've got to understand the county. You've got to understand what it looks like and go out there and advocate for that solution, because a solution for Clayton isn't a solution for Pine Level. A solution for Benson isn't a solution for Cleveland. Johnson County is especially unique in that regard. It goes back to my point. You've got to know where you've been to know where you're going. And I understand that. But you're right. It doesn't make any sense for those dollars to be spent where they're being spent. And the formula, while imperfect, was a good change from where it was, but it needs further tweaking. And we need to be linked further with Raleigh over here.
But this is DeVan Barbour, straight from Benson, to come down here and talk to you. And I'm not even going to offer him this microphone.
I know, but that's only if I'm going to say something I really want to make sure everybody hears in the back. I'm going to use a microphone. And I'm going to say some things I want to make sure everybody hears all the way in the back tonight. The first thing I want to say is, before I get started, your question about education in North Carolina. 2 days ago, a day ago, I got the survey from the NCAE and the NEA, the National Education Association survey, if you want their endorsement. I pulled it back out of the trash folder in my email. Laugh. No. Because here's what's important. Here are the questions that the education's associations feel are important when they're figuring out which elected officials should represent education. So let me come here. Let's see. Medicaid expansion. Let's see. Where's the my favorite one? They asked about I had it right here. Tax rates. They asked about student loan forgiveness. They ask about, do you support extending? Here we go. Because this, which approaches to preventing gun violence do you support? Universal background checks, extending initial background checks, banning assault-style rifles, increased funding and access to mental health and all that fun stuff. Prohibition on federal funding to purchase firearms for educators, preserving gun-free zones. None of the above. There's a lot of none of the above in that survey. There's 50 questions on that survey. Not one of them had anything to do with educating a child. Not one of them.
That's because it's indoctrination.
Tell them. Yeah. Tell them.
That's all it is.
I know. So you want to talk about the Department of Educations and the associations and those advocating for education in the state of North Carolina? Whew. They don't care anything about educating our children. But that's a soapbox that I'll get on a different day. My name's DeVan Barbour, and I want to represent you in Washington, D.C. as your next congressman for District 13, and I'd be honored to have that opportunity. I never write speeches and think about what I'm going to say before I come up here, and sooner or later that's going to bite me in the tail, but until then we'll just keep having fun. But I get in the back, and Dale picks on me because my hand twitches every now and again when I get fired up, and I get fired up.
Well, mine twitched earlier, so.
There you go. I'm not going to do that. I told folks at the county convention the other night that I signed up to represent you all in Washington on the day one because I want to go to Washington because I want to represent my community and the interests of my community, because the one thing that pulled me into this race was the thought of my 6-year-old daughter going to South Johnston High School and what the halls of that high school would look like on the trajectory of our society and our nation today. It scared the death out of me. I told my wife I was fed up. She said, go do something about it. And here we are. I want to talk to you a couple of things tonight. Y'all know me. Y'all know I'm a conservative. I'm red blooded. I've been here forever.
I've been involved forever, Johnston JCC Board of Trustees, all the way down to District Chairman. I check all the boxes, but there's two things I want to mention to you tonight and why I want to go to Washington. I get asked all the time, what are some of the first things you're going to do when you go to Washington? The good answer is find the bathroom, because I'm not from up there and I don't know where any of that stuff is. Glad you don't laugh at that. So at any rate, it seems as if every time you turn on the TV or you open the newspaper, the thing you want to do first changes, because there's so many things up there that are just upside down and backwards. This morning, and y'all know it's bad when I write down notes, okay? This morning at 2:30 a.m., a 2,700-page omnibus spending bill was sent to your congressman and all of the U.S. Congress for a vote at 10 a.m. So it hit their inbox at 2:30 a.m. They were to vote on it at 10 a.m. It was 2,700 pages. It was $1.512 trillion. They said it was a 6% baseline increase, but no one could find what the baseline was defined of, so they could have just pulled that number out of the air. There were zero changes in oil and gas. There were zero changes on border security. There were zero changes in COVID mandates. It included $13.6 billion in aid to Ukraine with no debate or earmarks on what that would go towards, and $15.6 billion in COVID funding going Lord knows where. It hit their inbox at 2:30 a.m. and they were to vote on it at 10 a.m. And you wonder why our nation's in the financial stance that it is. So one of the first things I want to do when I get to Washington, D.C. is I want to advocate to, sponsor, and support the reinstitution of the Byrd Committee. The Byrd Committee, I had to write it down because they all got long names. The Byrd Committee was the Joint Committee on Reduction of Non-Essential Federal Expenditures. The Byrd Committee was a committee from 1941 to 1974, okay? To give you an idea how this works. So it was a committee, and the only point of the committee was to go through federal spending and determine what was essential, what was non-essential, strike non-essential spending. That's a crazy thought nowadays, isn't it? To hold funding accountable, right? In 1941, the national debt was $49 billion. From 1941 to 1974, the debt had increased to $475 billion. So in the 33-year existence of that committee, the national debt increased $426 billion. Then in 1974, that committee was done away with and abolished. In the 33 years after 1974, okay, so from 74 to 2007, the national debt went from $475 billion to $9.008 trillion. So in the 33 years you had the committee, the debt increased $426 billion. In the 33 years since, the debt increased $8.553 trillion. Because nobody's looking after it anymore. The first thing I want to do is advocate for and lobby for a seat on the Byrd Committee, which is the Joint Committee on Reduction of Non-Essential Federal Expenditures, to bring the spending in Washington back in check. There's no doubt about it, it's got to be done. So people say, I know I was asked what committee I would want to be on the survey, and if we don't get this nation's spending under control, you want to talk about how you can break other nations, whether it be Russia or China, get our debt under control so we don't have to worry about, reliance on them, and that'd be step one, okay? The second thing politically I want to talk to you about tonight. Whew, you see me shaking here?
No, that shaking was just that first night. Now,
how many, how many of you have, you've had kids that go to school, right? We all teach our kids to stand up for those that are, I'm a Shriner. So, Shriners work for Shriners Hospital for Children, and, we help kids with, spinal cord and clip out and all that fun stuff. So we all have kids, and we want to raise our kid in a way where they'll stand up for themselves and they'll stand up for other people, especially those that may, have difficulties, okay? So imagine your kid's at school, and they're standing beside, someone that maybe have a disability or may, come from a lower income or whatnot, and a bully comes up and starts bullying that kid. And your child is standing right beside that kid. What would you want that child to do? What would you want your child to do? Stand up for them, right? You want them to stand up for, and protect. Now imagine that bully, as he's bullying that child, that bully turns to your child and saying, you better stay out of it, because if you don't, there's going to be hell to pay. Now, at South Johnston High School, that was a good way to get your butt whooped if you looked at somebody and made that comment. Y'all from Benson, you can back me up on that, right, Mr. Benson? Tonight, the Department of Defense released a message that said the transfer of combat aircraft right now would be mistaken by Mr. Putin and the Russians as an escalatory step. An escalatory step is bombing a children at a maternity hospital. And there's a difference between escalating and matching. Okay? Should we escalate a war in Ukraine and Russia? No. But when Putin is bombing civilians and children's hospitals, something has to be done. Could you imagine in your life, back in the Cold War, could you imagine living in a day where Russia turned to the United States and said, and you're going to stay out of it or there will be consequences, and your government in Washington said, all right, cool, yeah, you got it. We're good. We're good. You keep on. You're fine. Don't worry about it. That's where we are today. That's where we are today. Should we be in this position? No, because it should have never happened. All right? Because I'm going to tell you exactly what would have happened if that comment had been made between 2016 and 2020. Putin would have said, stay out. I was trying not to cuss on camera. Putin would have said, stay out of it, or I'm going to send a nuke your way. Trump would have said, you better pray to God it don't miss. And he'd have thought twice about it. It should have never happened. It should have never started. And if we had a strong voice in Washington, if we had a strong leader in Washington, somebody that wasn't afraid to stand up, then maybe we wouldn't be where we are today, but we are. And we're sending a message to the world with our complacency and are sitting on the sideline and allowing the atrocities in Ukraine to happen. So, I don't know. That's my soapbox. And I've tried to, if y'all follow me on social media, I've put my toes in the water on that bad boy a couple of times, and then the guys say, be careful, be careful. Well, I'm not going to be careful anymore, because if somebody came over here and walked in the halls of the Shriners Hospitals for Children, they'd have a bad day. Because there'd be a Johnston County boy in Greenville, South Carolina. Okay? The last thing I want to tell you is I'm running for Congress because I love our community. And I want to support our community. And I feel it's important that our community be represented in Washington, D.C. Okay? Primaries are good. Okay? But primaries are also tricky. It's important that you do your research. I can stand up here and give the greatest, most rebel-rousing speech I can ever give in my life. Go back and research it and do your research and do some digging on me. Don't just go off of my words. Okay? When filing closed, this race got personal. Because I stood in that courthouse and I watched a handful of people, in my opinion, walk up to a microphone and work to mislead, misrepresent, and mislead my neighbors, my friends, and my community. And I hate Mr. Kent's not still here, but it's a long drive back to Chapel Hill, where he lives. Because I'd have told him, I grew up in Benson. I didn't have to go to liberal Stanford University to learn what makes the United States great, because I knew what made the United States great when I was born and raised up at Medlin and Dorman Hardware Store. It was brought up and instilled in me. But maybe letting Stanford University teach him what made America great is why he was a Democrat until 2020. Who knows? Maybe that's how Stanford teaches you what's great about America. But in Johnston County, in our values, you don't have to go to a university to learn what makes America great, because we know, because we live in it every single day. This race is personal. And there's a lot of people with a lot of money getting into this race. And you read a lot of articles about all the money everybody else has. But let me tell you something. If I filed a finance report and went public on January 31, had $160-something thousand in it with 171 individual donors, and almost all of them lived right here in the district. Good buddy of mine from college got smart and moved to Key West, so that was one who done it, right? I raised $160-something thousand from 170 people right here in the district. If I filed a finance report that had millions of dollars and only one donor, you know, are you representing the people or are you representing yourself? Right? And if you're willing to put that much money, you know, if you're willing to, you know, you don't put something in if you ain't willing to get something out. So, you know, we can talk about money all you want, but we've got a message. And I believe that we live in a day where message trumps money every single time. And if you go to the people and if you go to the voters and if you shake them if you shake their hand and you look them in the eye and you tell them, I'm going to represent you in Congress because I'm going to represent you in Congress, and I'm not going to represent the PACs that funded me, the special interests from out of town that funded me, the whoever else funded me, or my own pockets, that's going to resonate, and we're going to get the support. So I want you to know that we're out there fighting and we're working hard because we want a Johnston County District 13 conservative with your interest in mind. Because when I'm in Washington, D.C., you will always know where I'm at. I'll say it again, I said Thursday night. 2383 Federal Road, Benson, North Carolina, 27504. That's where I'm at. And when we win, I'm not moving to Washington, D.C. I'll be on Federal Road. And if you get mad, call Gary, he can walk to my house. True. So, you know, I ramble and I've ranted, and it hadn't been maybe a rebel rouser, but I just want to leave you with a couple messages tonight. Our nation, our country's broken. And I've said the whole time, we're not in the middle of the fight to save our nation, we're at the end of the fight to save our nation. And I think we're at the end of the fight to save our nation. Because when you combine record inflation with record gas prices, it's going to get, you ain't seen nothing yet. We're going to work hard, we're going to fight hard, because I want to go to Washington, because I want to dig my boots in and stand up for you guys, and that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to ask for your vote, and I'm going to ask for your support, because you know who I am. You know where I'm at, and you know that what I tell you is true and it's genuine, and I'm never going to mislead you or misrepresent you, and you always know exactly what you get out of DeVan Barbour, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. So, my name's DeVan Barbour for Congress. Barbour is at the bottom because it starts with a C and it went backwards, right? So who said that? Started with a C, B's last. So Barbour's at the bottom. I'd like for you to check that one if you would. I'd appreciate your support, and I'd appreciate your vote for Congress and any help you may have. So thank you very much for your time and the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, DeVan. I'm gonna let him get his applause here. We all like Little D, as Miss Donna would call him.
Get mad.
It's okay. I did too earlier, and I didn't need to. So, is there anybody here that has questions for DeVan?
Would you support repealing the NFA?
I'm gonna sit back down for that.
Yes. Yes, I would support repealing the NFA. Do I think, do you need to be able to go to TAG Firearms and buy an M18 tank and drive it down Main Street, Clayton? Probably not. Okay. But there are ways to address, you know, maybe putting a regulation on buying a tank that could be addressed in legislation other than the NFA. But there are a lot of things in the NFA that are ridiculous. The fact that a suppressor is regulated at the point that it should be, that it is, blows my mind. A suppressor shouldn't be seen any different than a scope, if you think about it. Because a suppressor doesn't do anything to change the way that firearm works and how that firearm operates. And when you're talking about firearms and legislation, you're talking about the mechanics of the firearm. You're not talking about the optics. You're not talking about the scope. You're not talking about the grip. You're talking about the suppressors should be seen the exact same way. So yes, I'll go out and say that I would support a repeal of the NFA because I think that there are better ways to address things like driving tanks down Main Street, where you can update it and deregulate things that shouldn't be regulated to the extent that they are. It's a great question. Hey, I like that for an answer. Hey, that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. Yes, sir. Me too. Me too. I gotta get better at this stuff. I get too
How
round.
accessible will you be to the public?
Oh, good question.
Yeah.
When I moved down here,
Yeah.
I had some issues with in New York, and I had to deal with a congressman in New York.
I'm sorry.
Called him.
Yeah.
He's only in office 2 years, so it took 2 years to get to him. So by the time I got him, he got off. That one, and I'm really tired of hearing about committees in D.C. Every goddamn thing in D.C. is a committee.
Yeah, it is.
Why can't you guys read the bill?
Yeah.
If it don't add up, you don't vote for it. So that's it. You don't need a committee to figure that out.
Yeah.
Is that bird still around?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So no, the bird's not still around these.
So they got to reinstitute.
Yeah, we did
Another
that.
committee to do your job.
Yeah, we had to do that committee. That was the other thing. I knew I was forgetting something. Along with reinstituting the bird committee, I would put a 5-day cooling off period with every bill, to where anytime a bill is introduced, you had to have a minimum 5.
How
That's
about
right.
reading?
Well, how can you read? They gave you 2:30 in the morning. They emailed you a 2,700-page bill and said we're voting on it at 10 a.m.
I'll never forget Pelosi when
So,
the mama kid was passing.
We got to read. Yeah, we got to.
just
So along
2,000
with.
pages.
So that's.
Sign it and we read it later.
So that's a great question, a 2-part question. Number one, on the committees and stuff, along with the bird, it would be a 5-day cooling off period for all legislation from introduction to a vote. That, if it got emailed this morning at 2:30 a.m., it shouldn't be available for a vote for 5 days, especially when it's a $2,700, $1.6 trillion spending bill. Okay, so that's the other piece of that I forgot. And actually, I didn't write it down. So that's what happens when you write stuff down and you forget stuff. So you never write stuff down.
I think that bill might better.
The second part of that, how accessible am I going to be as your congressman? I love that question. Did you get my mailer today?
Yes, sir.
Did you see them 2 kids on that?
Yes, sir.
They're cute as hell. They're cute as they can be. Gary can tell you where I live, right down the path, right around the corner. I am not going to miss a minute more of my children's life than I have to. I'm willing to sacrifice a bit of it because I care about y'all that much and because I love y'all that much, but I'm not going to miss a minute more than I got to. So if you want to come find me, if I'm not on the back porch, I might be at La Casita, that New Mexican restaurant at 40 and 95 there in town. We go to La Piazza a lot because they got awesome pasta when you need a high carb night. So you can find me on Tuesday nights. I have my secret. I play hockey, so I don't know.
Drive donkeys.
Break my leg. So yeah, you can find me on Tuesday nights at the hockey ring. How accessible I'm gonna be? I'm gonna be here. I mean, the first thing I did before I even talked to my wife about running for Congress is I called a few congressmen that have young kids, and I asked them what type of time commitment it was. And I'm not going to give a name, but I appreciated their honesty. And his first comment was, he said, DeVan, if the public knew how little time you actually had to be in D.C., they would either be really happy or really mad. Okay? They said a lot of times it's Tuesday to Thursday. It's usually not any other week, and if it's nothing big, in Congress you can vote by proxy if you can't be here. So a lot of them go up on Tuesday and they come back on Thursday, and that's exactly what I plan to do. So I'm not going to be. Some folks want to go to Washington for the parties on the weekend. That ain't this guy. We have my parties on the weekend or Saturday nights in the den with Frozen playing through the speakers and dancing with my girl. So you're gonna find me here because Mr. Gary's been back down to my house a couple times. That's a pretty nice spot back there. I mean, I got a great house on family land across the pond from my neighbors, from my uncles, fish in the pond, and 1,726 feet off the road. Yeah, I take that over DC anytime. So accessible. I've got business cards that I hand out, and I'll tell you just like I tell the rest of them. There's a cell phone number on this card. That's my cell phone today, and that's going to be my cell phone as your congressman, and it's not going to change. Then you can call it, you can text it. Don't leave me a voicemail. I never check my voicemail. You can call me, you can text me, you can find me at a Mexican restaurant because I'm not going to be up there in a minute more than I got to. And I love that you asked that question because there's a few other folks running around and we don't know where they're from. Let's let us know where they're going to go. I said it. There you go. Yes, sir. Thank you.
I have a question since, you're going to represent us, and I appreciate that, and I agree with what you're saying. But a lot of times you pass bills, just like that 2,700-page bill, which bill and it comes to be law. But what we're finding out is they pass a law, but it's the bureaucracy who runs it. And I think recently, to put insult to injury, I think it was one of the courts just reversed the EPA or gave the EPA the rules to increase standards for emissions in California, which is going to go across the country. My question is, how do we decrease the unelected bureaucracy and take that money away and put it back into your hands and get the bills like they're supposed to be?
Are these planted questions?
This is experience.
Are these planted questions?
These are experienced and tired
Yes.
of the runaround and no
Yes.
voice
I can. Yes. Thank you.
and frustration.
Thank you. Couple things. Number one, on day one, you institute a rule that you can hire one new federal employee for every 2 that retire, and not 1 person more. So only when 2 employees retire can you hire 1. And you have a 1 to 2 rule moving forward. Plus, you freeze salary and benefits and stop them on a dime from the word go. So you can reduce the size of the bureaucracy with those hiring limits and those salary freezes, okay? So that's step 1, and that's gonna reduce expenditures there and all that, and reduce the size. Step 2, the folks on the campaign hate when I talk about term limits. Say, well, if you're doing a good job, you should be able to stay up there for 170 years. Well, I tell folks, I'm not gonna miss any more. If she's gonna play softball at South Johnston, she's gonna be a cheerleader at South Johnston. Look, I'm doing this thing because I'm worried about South Johnston. She's got about 8 years till she gets there, and we're either gonna have it fixed and I'll be able to come home and hold my head high, or might as well come on home because there ain't gonna be any fixing to it. And you wanna live out the days we can off the grid right there 700 feet off the road. Am I right? So I got no problem with term limits because I really don't care to be up there any longer than the term limit resolutions are, as they are right now. There's a term limit resolution on the floor right now that'll be brought up in the next Congress. And it's a 6 terms for a House member, and it's 2 terms for a Senate member. So 12-year total.
Is that gonna be an amendment or?
That's the resolution. They think it may have some teeth because you'll love this. The resolution doesn't apply to anyone currently in Congress. Right? Hey, what's on the floor? So, either way. So, yes, so they can't stay for more than 12 years, but we're just fine.
Grandfather.
The other part of that is people. People talk about the swamp. About draining the swamp, and anytime you hear somebody say drain the swamp, they think they're talking about politicians, right? You know, rhinos and Democrats and all this, that, and the other. Swamp ain't politicians, y'all. The swamp is the men in the blue suits. Walk down K Street and I'm gonna show you the swamp. Because let me tell you something, in 2004, I wrote a letter of recommendation for a guy that was applying for a job at the White House. He got that job in 2004 just because of my letter. That was the only thing they took into. I'm just kidding, that was a joke. So he got that job in the White House in 2004. He went to work in DC in the White House. He worked at the mailroom. If you ever get a letter, it's from the president that says, you know, congratulations on hitting the home run at the T-ball game, and it was signed. He was the guy that worked the auto pen on that letter, right, in 2004. So he got hired to the White House under President Bush 43, and he worked at the White House under President Bush. Then President Bush left office. Obama came in. You know what he did? He continued to work in the White House under the Obama administration for the 8 years there. Then President Trump came on the office. You know what he did? He continued to work in the White House under the Trump administration. Then President Biden came in, and you know what he did? He continues to work in the White House under the Biden administration. Now in 2004, he was working the auto pen down in the mailroom, okay? On Inauguration Day in 2017, you know, they do the show out in front of everybody, and then they go back inside, and he sat down on the table, surrounded by family, and signed a document. He started with the auto pen in 2004. In 2017, he typed up the document. Donald Trump signed it and handed it to him for him to take to the archives. He was wearing a blue suit, okay? The swamp's not the politicians, the swamp's the blue suits, okay? So, that resolution that sits on the floor to be brought up by the next Congress is gonna state term limits, 6 for a House member, 2 for a senator. And as soon as I walk to the door, I'll step up to the mic as a freshman congressman, maybe the first thing I ever do representing you guys, and you can like it or hate it, but hey, it's where I'm at. I'll walk to the mic and I'll offer an amendment to include a 12-year limit on all senior level employment positions across the federal government, and I'll tie it to the bureaucracies as well. Because let me tell you something, you can't term limit politicians without also term limiting the bureaucrats. Because in some respects, the politicians are the only thing that can hold the bureaucrats in check. Okay, so if you take the elected officials out, now they're just going to run rampant. So if you don't check the blue suits, you have to, exactly the same thing happens. So that's a great question. Number one, you only hire one for every two that go. You freeze the salary, freeze the benefits, and you add to the term limit bill a 12-year limit on senior federal staff in all departments. Hold on, you started there. So I'll go back to the non-essential expenditures for the federal government. We'll start with the Department of Education.
There you go.
Right? So anyway, that's a great question. Thank you. These are fun. Who else got teed up?
Look, you're done.
I appreciate y'all a whole lot now. It means a lot. I appreciate your friendship and your support. And look, they're going out. Oh, yes, ma'am.
I especially liked when you were talking about Ukraine and why are we just sitting here just, oh, no.
Yeah.
And you are DeVan with an A, and I'm from California. My favorite person in the House of Representatives was DeVan.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And I always got a thank you note for him with not a little bit thing attached sending me some more money.
Yeah.
It's always just a thank you.
That's awesome. Well, that's important, and I'm telling you, the art of thank you notes are thing that's lost, and thank you for that. Now I'm going to tell you, and you say things in front of a camera, I'll say it in front of a camera. If Putin's going to escalate, if Putin wants a war with the U.S., he's going to have a war with the U.S. And you got to get ready. So I'm just, only he knows what he's going to do. But I'm with you on it, so I appreciate that. But look, I appreciate y'all's friendship and y'all's support and all y'all do. And look, I'm going to tell you one thing. They may outspend me, but they're not going to outwork me. And our message is going to resonate more than their money every single time. So I appreciate your friendship, your support. Go down, Barbour's at the bottom. I'd appreciate your vote on May 17th.